So hello and welcome everyone to this webinar today. I'm very excited to introduce our speakers and welcome you to listen about stories from place-based leaders around Australia on how to use data to drive community-led social change. I'd like to start by acknowledging traditional owners of the lands that I'm coming to you from today, which is Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. Pay my respects to elders past, present and extend that acknowledgement to all the peoples and the lands that you're joining us from. And we have people from all over Australia today and also from Aotearoa. So welcome everyone. My name's Christy Mansfield. I'm the CEO and founder of Seer Data, and I'm thrilled to introduce the panel today. So Genevieve Jacobs, AM, is the CEO of Hands Across Canberra, the ACT's Community Foundation, formerly a ABC Canberra broadcaster and journalist. She is the Director of Regional Development Australia's Southern New South Wales Board and the Australian Centre for Christianity and Culture. She has chaired several ACT government and not-for-profit boards, and in 2021 was made a member of the Order of Australia in recognition of her services to broadcasting and the community. Thank you so much for joining us, Genevieve.
It's my great pleasure, Christy. And I'm also joined by Julia Lisa, who manages our community engagement. So I'm really looking forward to participating in this. Julia is also on standby.
Thanks, Genevieve. And thrilled to have you here. We've got a long history of working with Hands Across Canberra for many years, firstly with Vital Signs, but I'm sure we'll get into that in a moment. I'd love to introduce to you Amy Robinson, who is the Executive Officer of the Greater Shepparton Lighthouse Project, a place-based initiative extremely close to my heart and an initiative and team and leadership that I respect deeply, given our long history of co-design and collaboration with the Seer platform. The Greater Shepparton Lighthouse Project was the first project that we ever worked with to support data access in the early years, which was about 10 years ago now, Amy, and you really have played a pivotal role in that entire journey. So the Greater Shepparton Lighthouse Project is a place-based initiative focusing on improving health, education and life outcomes for local children, young people and families. Since 2018, Amy has played such an essential role in shaping the initiative's direction. Her work is grounded in a deep commitment to social justice, with strong emphasis on amplifying community voice and ensuring that lived experience and community-led decision-making are at the heart of the initiative and prioritised in the community. Amy holds key advisory roles with Shepparton Education First Youth FOIA Advisory, the Lift Off Scholarships Committee, the Department of Education's Shepparton Education Plan Advisory Board, and Amy, it's wonderful to see you also as an appointed member of the National Community Council at Place Australia. Thank you for joining, Amy.
No, thank you. I'm really looking forward to today's discussion, and it does feel like a long journey that we've been on together. So it's a great reflective time as well.
Yeah, I agree completely. Thank you. And Christine Cottrell has spent 7.5 years leading the Connected Beginnings Mildura team, working alongside the community and with services to ensure all children are treated equally and feel loved and safe. Prior to this, Christine spent 20 years working in not-for-profit services, including the Australian Institute of Company Directors, the Royal Australasian College of Medical Administrators. And Christine is also a director of the Mallee Family Care and Nicholas Point Football Club. And Christine, we've worked together for many years as well. So thank you so much for joining us.
No worries, it's great to be here. Looking forward to it.
Thank you. All right, so we've got so much to cover today. What we are going to go through our 4 organisations working all in place, and Seer is the data platform for many. I'm really thrilled to have Hands Across Canberra give the perspective from community foundations, and then of course Lighthouse and Connected Beginnings from their own contexts. You can learn more about these organisations as we share the resources. So we're going to share each organisation's stories of change We're going to talk about the decisions that were made with data at the centre or are being made to drive change. We're going to learn about, what everyone's learned along the way and what's next. What I would invite you to do is please drop questions into the chat. We will endeavour to answer those questions as we go through, but we do have as well a Q&A session at the end. And then we're also going to invite you to get early access to the newly developed community data workforce training modules, which will be available for free, that we've developed together with Place Australia, and some more info on what's coming next in our webinar. So let's get started. So Amy, firstly, let's start with you. Could you kindly share a little bit about the journey? As you said, we've worked together for such a long time. It's been such an incredible journey, and we've learned a lot along the way. Would love to hear from your perspective what that's been like and where you're going from here.
Great, thanks. Well, yeah, look, data was really at the heart of what caused Lighthouse to become into existence, really. So at the time, going back 12 years, our teen pregnancy rate was double the Victorian state average. We had a higher number of young people that were interacting with the justice system. Our early years data, our AEDC figures, were showing vulnerability that we as a community weren't willing to accept. And our NAPLAN data was not favourable, and that transition to higher education and employment was just lacking, we're lagging behind the Victorian state average. So really it was leaders that stood up at the time that said, we need to rally around as a community, and we need to really interrogate this data and find ways to make it more accessible. And to put that information, I guess, in front of change leaders in the community that had the capability to assist to shift the dial. So we saw so much investment in services in the town, but yet that population level data was just not shifting. And so, yeah, it was the business community that really rallied and said, well, we've all got a role to play here. And so, yeah, the business community rallied around, and Lighthouse really formed 12 years ago. So we started working with Seer about 10 years ago, and at the time we had community leadership tables of about 50 or 60 community leaders, all looking at our strategic areas of work across the early years, primary, secondary, and transition to work. And so we went on a journey as a community, working with Seer, building our data platform, but also along the journey, it was about how to train the community and build that capacity and leadership around understanding the data, interrogating the data, and making better decisions with it. So yeah, it was identified really early on that we needed an opportunity, a shared measurement system where we could hold all that data sets, not only the publicly available data, but it was about that equity of unlocking the data that belonged to our community, that people and leaders in the community weren't able to clearly see. So yeah, I guess we really went on that journey of understanding together, and yeah, it was fantastic to see people creating their own data insights and understanding how they could utilise this within their own practice and work, but also the power that it represented in terms of telling a really clear story with the data to advocate for additional resourcing and funding. So yeah, I think the platform was a game changer for our community. And what I loved about it, and what I love about it today, is that it really highlights not only what's wrong, but what's strong. So to have a platform where we can share those stories of change as well alongside the data, and yeah, really celebrate those bright spots where things are working, I think is equally important for our community.
Thanks, Amy. I just wanted to understand a bit more about that journey. So with bringing on, and actually George from Global Sisters, who runs their place-based initiatives, she's asking the question, how do you manage the expectations and the priorities of so many community leaders and I guess so many community organisations, and what helped bring them along the journey?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think, to be honest, we created the State of Greater Shepparton's Children's Report, and so that is a collaboration between our local council's Best Start Alliance, Catholic Care Victoria Communities for Children, and Lighthouse. And so I think working together and having Seer on board to help guide that process was a game changer, because, you know, data is power, and sometimes, you know, for certain reasons around funding arrangements, data can be quite tightly held. So I would say, yeah, moving at the speed of trust is really important, but also having Seer sitting behind this, guiding us through the journey and having the arrangements in place really did help streamline the whole thing. And I think it's such an unknown thing, but once you get to a point where you can create that platform and actually see the insights being generated and have a look at what data is being produced, I think people see the benefit and they understand what it can represent in terms of that community accountability and sharing the impact stories.
Thank you. Because collaboration is one of the hardest, I think, pieces of work to maintain in place-based work, Amy. I mean, there's many challenges in the work that you do and many opportunities. How have you seen in the last couple of years, you know, the collaborative effort become easier because of the visibility that you all share around the insights and data, or have things changed, or do other dynamics impact that?
Yeah, I think things have absolutely changed. And I must say, another huge piece of work that Lighthouse started back in 2015 is our 1,000 conversations. So we go out into the community and we speak to 1,000 people, and half of those people are young people under the age of 25. And so by hearing from community around what are their priorities, sort of matching up the story with the data is really, really important. So yeah, look, so many of our work, our community initiatives have come straight out of what we've heard in 1,000 conversations, and then backed up by what we're seeing in the data, whether it's around youth transitions, engagement in the justice system, our early years data. So directly from that, we created our family haven in Mooroopna, directly addressing the early years ADC data. We were hearing from our community, and the data certainly reflected that, people just needed a safe space, an open door. They wanted to be able to access earlier intervention and preventative support that increased their capacity. Equally, our Pit Stop initiative, we're hearing from young people, and certainly our attendance and engagement in school data was showing us that kids needed more hands-on learning options. They needed places to connect with positive mentors and role models. So we created our Pit Stop initiative. Our Ollie after school program is another example of young people saying that I just need a safe space. We need to connect with mentors and role models. And yeah, I guess that aspiration to transition to higher education and employment. So data has certainly shaped a massive, it sets out our strategic priorities for community. It's really important for us to share back that data with our community and measure that we are having an impact and that we're on the right track. So yeah, it's been such a powerful tool. I think the relationship with the understanding of how the stories and the data together across the journey in our community, we've seen, such growth in the last 10 years.
Thanks. We're going to have a look at one of your public, the Greater Shepparton Children's Report a bit later, but of course there's lots of work that's going on behind the scenes. Amy, what have you learned as one of the first PBIs really using data at the centre, that you could recommend to others getting started on their journey?
I think that, moving at the speed of trust is really, really important. I think that, there are so many reasons why data is tightly held. Just being, persistent with it. Sometimes it is very hard to access the data that we are wanting to showcase for our community. But the trust in also highlighting those case studies is really, really important, because local interpretation of the data is key as well. So having the platform, available to highlight both is really critical. And together the stories and the data are such a powerful tool when blended in that way. I think that, look, it's just keeping community at the centre, and I think it's also about sharing back the data with community. And in our community, I feel that we don't want to over consult. So especially in our consultation, I think knowing that we have the option to use the data that comes our way and generate insights that are fit for other organisations, whether it's local council, other organisations that are about to embark upon work, to really take what is already here and not have to go back and communicate with community all the time so that they're sort of repeating their story, I think is really important. But look, the platform has been amazing for us to, share our State of Greater Shep Children's Report in a way that is accessible, up to date, brings our community together by highlighting what's working well as really addressing where our challenges are.
Thanks, Amy. I just got a question from Carolyn Moncton. Hi, Carolyn. Thank you for that. Amy, I'm wondering if perhaps we just take that one for the Q&A. It's about what the data indicates since the Greater Shepparton College has been created. So I'll let you just think on that. You might not have all the insights directly available right now. I just wanted to ask, what's next?
Yeah, so look, I think what's next for us, we're the lead funded agency for a really exciting new youth mental health initiative called the Goulburn Region Open Dialogue Connect. So this is a partnership between Goulburn Valley Health and their mental health unit, the Open Dialogue Centre of Australia, Berry Street's Youth Foyer and Lighthouse. So we're working together with many organisations across the community, including Rumballara, the wellbeing team at our local Greater Shepparton Secondary College, and Headspace and youth services in the town. And we're doing a systems change piece of work over the next 4 years that will enable us to empower young people regarding their mental health and care plan journeys. I guess when we first came to the party, embarking on this project, and the working group was really grappling with how we're going to track and monitor change across so many different data sources collected in different ways, coming together to prove up our theory of change. So I guess as a backbone, it's coming to the table with a solution is quite a strong thing, to be able to say we have this relationship with Seer, we have this data platform at our disposal. And I guess the opportunity that sits with that is how we are building that data literacy in our community, and the leadership around how we use data and how we track and monitor change is super exciting. We're really excited to be embarking on that 4-year project. And I think the other thing that's really exciting is regarding the AI movement and how Seer have embraced that. And I think it, again, just in the place-based and not-for-profit sector, we are really time poor, and I think that function is going to be a game changer for assisting to generate narrative that sits behind these insights, but also increasing more understanding for people that may not have a background in the data, to be able to build their confidence, awareness and use of that narrative to tell their data story. And I guess as a sector, as the place-based sector, we're always, you know, trying to tell our impact story in ways that is really useful to government and to funders and to philanthropy. So, yeah, it's really important that we continue to progress along that journey so that we can really evidence the great work that happens not only in our community but in all communities across Australia. I think you know, yeah, it's such a hard thing carving out that time to monitor, evaluate, track and monitor change really well. And so, yeah, we're just really grateful for the journey that we've had to date with Seer and yeah, I guess the opportunities that it provides to communities like ours.
Oh, thanks, Amy. That's awesome. And congratulations on the next 4 years and the collaboration, which is really quite groundbreaking globally, I believe. So congrats. Liz, I saw that you've got a note too around a question about new data benchmarks and community data effectively. Might leave that for the end in the Q&A. And thank you very much, Amy, for those insights. That's fascinating. Over to you, Christine. We've worked together for about 5 years or so, and you've really embraced using data in your work at Connected Beginnings in Mildura. I'd love to hear your story.
No problem. Thank you. First of all, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners and the traditional lands on which I sit, which are the Latchi lands, and also our close neighbours, the Barkinji people, and obviously acknowledge all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples in the room and online. Yeah, so we have been using Seer for about 5 years, sort of going in not really knowing what we were going to use it for and what we were going to do with it. We're very lucky that we have access to data through our program from federal government that provide us with data, but some of it's state government data, some of it's federal government data. But on the other side of that, a lot of it we're actually not allowed to share. So we have to work out with the publicly available data that we can share and the privately available data that we're not allowed to share, how we tell our story. And a lot of the time, it's about acknowledging that the story of the data that you get is not actually the story you have locally. So a couple of examples of that are, if you employ one person, whether male or female, and you know, we do a lot of work with Aboriginal mums. So from our point of view, we're largely talking about Aboriginal mums here. We know that if you employ one Aboriginal mum in Mildura, no government data is going to change at all. It'll go up by one, but you will not notice it on any graph, any numbers, anything. It would be not insignificant, but it's not noticeable. However, from a local perspective, we know that the story is totally different. So what we know, if you manage to help one Aboriginal mum or person gain employment, the knock-on effect that has can affect at least 50 people, because it means if they have children, their children are now in kinder or early learning or going to school, so they're having access to early education. They are then getting health checks. The mum, for example, can then work on, oh, okay, I can go get my driver's license, because they have the ability to be able to do that, because in Victoria it's actually quite expensive to do that, which means then they can go and get a car because they have income coming in, they're employed, which means it can affect the wider family and the wider community in a really positive way. But what we knew is that data doesn't show up anywhere. You don't get that story. You just get the, oh, one person, great, but we don't see it. So what we decided to use Seer, the Seer platform for, was not just to show the data, but to show the local story. And that was really important for our local mums to be able to share their stories, to encourage other people, both locally and nationally, and you know, further afield if possible, to show their journey and how it is possible and how you can change not only your circumstances but other people's circumstances by doing even sometimes the smallest thing. I went and got my working with children's check, which means that now I can volunteer to do things with Connected Beginnings, because that's a requirement for our volunteers, because we work out of a school, we need a working with children's check. So it's the small things like that. And that's what Seer has allowed us to do. It hasn't just allowed us to go to the government with, hey, here's a whole heap of numbers, we've helped 20 people, that's great, it won't make a difference, but this is how we've helped 20 people, and this is the story of the knock-on effect that it's had. And another great example that we have of that is our mums group, which is called our Copper and Yarn group, who meet every week, wanted to tell their story. So we managed to find some funding to do a recording of the mums telling their story about their journey of copper and yarn and how it helps them in their lives, and how the group has been really beneficial for them. We use that then, so the Department of Education, the Federal Department of Education, who we report to, we have been able to use that as part of one of their videos to tell that story that they have then gone on to use as a presentation to the UN, which they went to, I think it was Rio in Brazil, to do this presentation to show how place-based work is working in Australia. Now, the Copper and Yarn mums, when they did this video, were thinking, yeah, we might be able to show it locally and we'll be able to tell our little bit of a story and it might help other mums. And then we've kind of said to them, is it okay? Obviously, we asked permission. Is it okay if we show this to the government? Yep, that's perfectly okay. Okay, we showed it to the government. That's great. They might be able to, acknowledge the great work we're doing locally. I don't think they ever expected that, their story or part of their story was going to be told to an international audience in Brazil at the UN, and highlighting the great work that Australia does with place-based initiatives. And, unfortunately our mums didn't get to go to that event, that's okay. It's a government thing, and the government did a great job. Just acknowledge that sometimes the governments do really great jobs in doing that presentation and putting across, because it wasn't just Mildura, it was a presentation about more connected beginning sites, but putting a story to allowed us to do, not just locally. Yes, the biggest impact is the impact on the mums and the children and the families and the wider community, but to know that your story is being told in other places because it's so beneficial to how change can be made in any area of the world is actually invaluable feedback. I don't think you could actually get better feedback than to say to, our mums, by the way, did you know this has happened and this is the impact you're having? So for us, it allows us to look at the data, see the data and match that up with what we're being told and see, actually, does that match up? Is the data we're getting telling the same story as what the local community are telling? And if not, how do we deal with that? And how do we reconcile that? And how do we go to government? How do we go to other places and say, well, your data is telling us this, but actually, here's all the evidence that we are being told, and this is what's actually happening. How do we get that to the people who make decisions? It's not just, oh, your data's only gone up 1%. It's actually, this is the story. And so we have been trying to use that to encourage people to make decisions based on not just actual data that they get, but on the whole picture, which is coming from our local community. And on the flip side of that, it also allows data or local data, whatever it might be, and some of it is so complicated that trying to understand it, even if you've got a background in it, can be really, it's complex information. So being able to present it in a way that anybody can understand, and it's not meaning that it's, oh, we have to simplify it, but data is a very complex idea, and lots of governments use it in very complicated ways, when actually sometimes it doesn't need to be complicated. It just needs to be, here's what it is, and here's the easiest way for us to understand what that means for our community. So then we have been able to give that back to our community and say, this is what they're telling us, this is what we're telling them, let's put it together and let's go forward. And how do we then, encourage governments and other decision making from there? So that's really what we've been using it for. And little tiny Mildura has, gone worldwide, which was highly unexpected.
It's very exciting to see that, and that local community, well, the mums and the Copper and Yarn group sharing their stories and being able to evidence the impact of the work that they're doing together and the decisions that they do together more broadly surfacing that. Because what you talk about, Christine, I think is something that all place-based initiatives really grapple with, which is population level data. We know there's problems with data collections, particularly collections of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who may not, because of historic reasons, which we can talk about I think another time, around the weaponisation use of data, how data has been used as a negative as opposed to a strengths-based approach. You know, oftentimes it's not always telling the full story, which is what you're just describing. So how do you support the story from the ground and then come up with, you know, that real genuine story from community that might be then eventually coming up in the population level data, but making a huge impact on the ground.
Yeah, and that's, exactly right. We have noticed, and, as I said at the beginning, we're in a really strange position that we have access to data that I can't share with anybody. So I can look at it and a couple of my team can look at it, but we're really limited to who can, but we can't share it with anyone. So I can't even look at it and then share it with our community because of the permissions that sit around that. And, that is what it is. There's not a lot we can do about it. But, the government are aware of that data. So it's, okay, I'm aware of that data. How do I get the stories to match up with that, even though I can't share it with people? So it's a really complex situation of going, okay, I know all of this data and I know all of these stories, and some of it, the data's not great. So it's how do you combat that? Because that's just what some people are saying. Oh, this data's not really very good in your area, blah, blah, and it's not improving. And it's like, well, actually, I can give you an example of 10 people that it is improving. And those 10 people have now affected 100, 200 people. But, it's then explaining that back to how that works. So it's been a long process, but it's been a good process to try and get your head around, it's not just about the numbers and how do we make it not just about the numbers, especially when the numbers are either secret or not, not great, when we know that things happening here are more positive. And that's what we're trying to do. Yes, the data is not great, but actually things that are happening locally are really positive. And if you continue to encourage the positive things that are happening, your population data will change. It's just going to take a long time. And that's something I think that people need to understand. Population level data does not change in 2 years. It's a long-term thing. So, but it's been good for that.
Yeah, and it's finding those community indicators, and we had that question a bit earlier, that markers of change and the impact becoming visible and seen alongside those stories that you spoke about. I think what sticks with me as we always do this work working with place-based initiatives is that data is a medium, it's a frame. And so if you're able to control, like film, if you're able to control that narrative and have ownership over that narrative with all the relevant data, including stories and indicators that are coming from community, then you can then tell that story to build and deepen trust to create the change you want to see.
That's exactly right. Yep.
There's a few comments. So Jenny Joyce has just mentioned that they love that government partners acknowledge the importance of local evidence and stories. And Christine, you talked about the fact that you are receiving data that's restricted. So for everyone who might be in this space or just coming in, so when we're working in place-based initiatives, often there's not granular data available publicly that would give insight into some of the questions that community might ask. And that might be because it's not collected, or that might be because of privacy concerns that custodians might have. And that might be because, it's very difficult to see what's happening on the ground with our current systems. So there are data that can be shared safely from many different custodians, including government and local service providers, and that's really happening in a vibrant way across Australia through safe and secure sharing of data. But as Christine mentioned, those custodians do not always authorise access to the data to be more freely available, Christine. And so it is a evolving space, and I'm hoping that for greater transparency, to ensure, though, of course, that it's safe and secure, that we'll see more and more being able to share with the community. And in the meantime, community voice and data continues to be a hugely recognisable data asset that decisions are made on locally and also from a policy perspective. Christine, thank you so much. We've got a couple of questions that we'll get to, and so I know that we had some comments around loving the insights, so thank you very much for that, and it's brilliant work. We'll get to see Christine's public dashboard in a moment. Now, Genevieve, it's so thrilling to have you represent Hands Across Canberra and the great vision that you have for using data across the ACT. And the community foundation space is really going through a massive transformation and opening up of opportunities. And so I'd love to hear your story. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Christy. So I thought I'd start with the background. Hands Across Canberra is the ACT's independent community foundation. It's one of around 100 across Australia. The community foundation movement is undergoing huge and rapid growth and change. So think of us not as a doing charity, but as a big piece of social infrastructure, a tool for the whole community. So at Hands Across Canberra, we work with over 350 local charities and community organisations. We raise funds for Canberra's most vulnerable people. We invest those responsibly, and we have evidence-based collaborative granting, which we do together with some other peer foundations. That's perhaps the kind of thing for which the foundation is best known, but there are several other strings to our bows. We also strengthen the ACT not-for-profit sector through education. We do a lot of capacity building work on skilling up our partners with things like social media skills, with governance skills. We're working on an innovation forum, bringing innovation thinking to the not-for-profit sector. We give them fundraising support. We build strong networks. We think of ourselves as creating a whole ecosystem, and we're a facilitator. We're a broker that sits at the centre. Regarding place, Canberra certainly appears wealthy, and it is. It's the wealthiest jurisdiction per average income in the whole of Australia. But what that means is when you've got a large number of people who are very well held and very secure in their employment, this is an expensive place to live. And if you drop off that plateau, it's a really long way to the bottom. I call it the Canberra cliff. So in a city of 450,000 people, we have 40,000 people living in poverty, including 10,000 children. We have older women facing rising homelessness rates. We have incredibly disproportionate rates of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people represented in prisons and in child removal for some quite specific demographic reasons. Rising disability service costs, and the one that's really rising rapidly is food insecurity. And again, very surprising for people, but right across the board, our community organisations are noting a massively increased demand for food supply and services. Community organisations differ very much in their resourcing and capacity. So we feel that the not-for-profits need access to high quality, current, independent data that's going to help them advocate effectively, sharpens their delivery, and also attracts sustainable funding, because there are hundreds of small community organisations endeavouring to work together with varying degrees of effectiveness. Data is a source of strength for all of them. It will really build their capacity. We've had community consultation on our Data Hub project with about 50 different sector representatives to indicate that a community-wide Data Hub would be welcome. We've founded some working groups, and I should say that the history to this is we've delivered previously 2 vital signs reports. Vital signs report on a single point in time data picture. Their utility is effective at that point of time, but a lot of it is about ABS data. It's fairly limited. And that's where the proposal for a community data hub came about, that's accessible, that's evolving constantly, that's useful for everyone. So as I said, community consultation with around about 50 sector representatives indicates that this idea will be welcome. We've formed a working party with representation from the YWCA, the ACT Council of Social Services, various community services bodies, the University of Canberra, previous vital signs contributors. There's a reference group to test and provide feedback on the project as we reach milestones. We've engaged about 20 participants from across the community. And part of this is for the idea of socialising the data hub, of which more in a moment. This is going to be a very big project indeed. So you've heard from Amy and Christine on their very place-based projects with regional communities, sometimes with a very specific scope. As far as we're aware, the Canberra Community Data Hub will be the first time anyone's built a community data hub across a whole jurisdiction, a population of 450,000 people. So this is a huge opportunity to see what difference data can make across a whole jurisdiction. But it also means it's really challenging. We will be very much building this plane as we're flying it. It's not a point-in-time project any longer. So why does it matter? The Canberra Community Data Hub, as we're now calling it, will give the Canberra community sector an independent lens through which progress can be tracked and accountability is maintained. So for charities and not-for-profits, it will provide credible evidence for their funding applications, for their advocacy with government. It will encourage a data-informed culture across the board. So that allows organisations to refine their programs, to focus on systemic barriers, to have really solid, credible evidence with which to buttress anecdotal evidence that they often have used to date. We think this will reduce duplication of effort because there'll be a centralised shared resource. And we think crucially that this will foster collaboration right across the sector and will establish some shared definitions and some measures of success. But there's also an important role for the wider community. So the Data Hub's going to, for the whole of the Canberra community, highlight areas of need that are often invisible because, as I said earlier, we're perceived as a very prosperous, comfortable, successful community, and that often minimises and disappears the areas of real urgent need. One of the things that will significantly be enhanced is giving people much greater access to the real challenges in the community and thereby encouraging them to give where they live, to understand that there is need here that they can remediate and act on. And we think that we're going to be able to enable really transparent conversations between government and philanthropy and the community sector about what works, what's working well, and what still needs attention. Building community for this is a key task, and it's quite a long-term process. The longer we've gone on with understanding what we're trying to do here, the more I fully anticipate that this project is going to take 3 to 5 years or more. We have had a range of reactions in the sector while we've been building the reference groups and the working parties that probably mirrors the capacity of the sector. We've got people who are interested and really keen and would like to come on board and begin providing their own data, right down to people who are sometimes, to be honest, quite suspicious, quite unsure of why the Community Foundation would be doing this work. As a couple of others have said, very protective of their data, which they feel is tightly held. There's also a view, though, that a lot of data that's provided to ACT government simply gets sucked into government and never surfaces again. So people have sourced robust data, provided it to government, and then only seen it again when government surfaces it for one purpose or another. And there's also not that interoperability between organisational data. We've started to understand that we need to build a really wide range of ties within the community sector. We need to work more closely with peak bodies. We need to work with organisations that have already got robust data like the YWCA and the Domestic Violence Crisis Service and the Youth Coalition. We have the opportunity to embed a major contribution from the University of Canberra's Living Well in the ACT survey content, which they've agreed to share with us. One of the key things that we've done recently has been to engage with a local organisation called the Data Collective. They'll participate in the reference group, but they're also going to begin working on collaborating with the sector. So they'll build knowledge, they'll build confidence with the hub, they'll educate community sector organisations on how to work with the hub, and that becomes a kind of ambassadorial project. Funding for that part of the project comes from a .au domain grant that we secured this year, which was for growing data skills right across the community. The design and implementation of the project is being funded by our partners at the Snow Foundation, who also work with us on vital signs. And of course, we're working with Seer to deliver the project, and that's also quite a long-running collaboration on a number of different projects. None as big and as long-term as this one, but Seer are good friends of Hands Across Canberra. And we're also beginning a partnership at the ANU with the McCusker Institute, because I'm conscious I need to find ways to manage this hub into the future. And one of the ways that we can do that effectively in Canberra is by leveraging collaboration. So we've got a couple of anticipated outcomes: to establish a wellbeing framework that's aligned with local priorities and open data, to promote growth through data-driven funding, to give donors and funders confidence regarding their impact, knowledge of where the challenges are, and real evidence that their funding is making a difference. We want to build a trusted, independent evidence base, and part of the use of that will be calling government to account. Government are aware of this project, they like the idea of it, but I've made plain from the very beginning that this will be a validated source of data that organisations can use to say to government, look, you're not doing well enough, you're not recognising where the needs are, you're not funding things appropriately. We want to drive sector collaboration, so we want to create a more unified community voice, and we want to deliver long-term benefit, obviously, for the 350 community organisations we work with across Canberra. So the Data Hub provides the evidence base that local charities need to advocate, to fundraise, and to deliver more effective programs. And with our support, Canberra's charities and the not-for-profit sector will have, I think, an unprecedented resource to guide their decisions and to strengthen their collective impact. So I often say that together we build a better and fairer community, and we think that the Canberra Community Data Hub will enormously strengthen that proposition for everyone who lives here in the ACT.
Thank you, Jen. Very exciting. Yes, I agree. I don't see data. I mean, of course, we work with so many place-based initiatives and many data hubs around Australia that have been really driven through regional need, not across an entire jurisdiction. So it's an incredibly exciting project underway. I've got some questions coming through, and maybe before we show, we can't show the Canberra Data Hub because it's in development, but before we show Lighthouse and Mildura, Connect to Beginners Mildura, I might ask a couple of questions if you don't mind spotlighting everyone. So Liz asks of you all, how do the speakers balance, how do you balance the use of data to show needs or issues for certain parts of community while maintaining strengths-based approach to bringing the community together? And how do you avoid the simple interpretation of that this community, the community has this problem? Would anyone like to take that question?
I will just hop in very briefly because others have more experience, but to say that one of the things that's really key to what we're designing with the Data Hub is storytelling capacity. So we want to be able to surface data, we want to be able to cross-reference it, and we want to be able to tell stories that are not much more complex in the telling, but that are not simple raw numbers. We think that the Data Hub is going to give us a lot of strength, and a key part of the role that we are going to play in the community will be that storytelling component on the hub, but also that storytelling component that goes into the wider community through socialising the hub, through creating media opportunities, through connecting with major stakeholders, through creating something that people understand on a widespread basis is a reliable source of stories as well as raw numbers.
I'm happy to chime in. I think, yeah, when I reflect on, you know, as a community, when we pull together the State of Greater Shepherd Children's Report, we do have little, you know, data parties where we're coming together with community leaders and looking at what we're seeing. and also just getting that interpretation, a full picture of things that are at play. And to the point around the data at Greater Shepparton Secondary College, that's a really good example of the context. So when Greater Shepparton Secondary College did merge onto the one school campus, it was in the midst of the COVID lockdowns. So in Greater Shepparton, we were completely isolated and locked down. So the issue, I guess, around supporting that transition and the timing, our community also, felt the lasting effects of the October 2022 flooding event. And so we saw that the trauma and the disconnect, and it was reflected in our 1,000 conversations as well. So whilst that data around the engagement and NAPLAN has sort of declined and hasn't indicated a strong trend in the right direction, it's been a bit up and down, but I think we really need another data sort of capture to work out what's really going on there, because the flip side of that is through the 1,000 conversations, our young people, we went in and spoke to every year 10 at Greater Shepparton Secondary College as part of that last consultation. And what we'll be hearing from young people was that they were feeling that, they had better subject selection, the facilities were amazing, the school was, essentially trying to make the equitable, make education more equitable across the region. And so, for a number of indicators, we were seeing that is how young people are experiencing the education sector more broadly. So I think it's really important to consider the storytelling that sits behind the data set as well. And so having those opportunities to have thought leaders coming together, interrogating the data and giving those insights, and having the opportunity to put those snapshot case stories up alongside the data is super important, and allows us to celebrate the strength of the community, what's working well, and also the resourcefulness and the strength of our people that reside here.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you so much. Christine, is there anything you'd like to add?
Yeah, I think I can probably tackle the second part of the question about how do you avoid the community has this problem. I think in our community, the community is well aware of what problems the government thinks that we have, and some of them are reasonably obvious to people who live in the community. But it's about highlighting what the community is doing to combat those problems. So, most people would be aware of what the government is trying to do to combat them. But on the opposite side of that, the government's possibly not aware of what the community is doing to try and combat those problems, and the perception that, this community just has this problem and there's no way to fix it. So by highlighting, as Amy said, by highlighting those community stories and those positive stories and how they have a positive impact on the community, we can then say, this is the change that's being made locally to help combat this problem that you're highlighting. So maybe instead of just highlighting the problem, you could also highlight what the local community is doing to try and combat it. And, we could work together, because that's what community really want. They want to be able to work together, say, yep, we know the issues. You guys don't know how to solve it. We don't know how to solve it, but we've got half an idea and you've got half an idea. How do we work together and how do we do that? So by highlighting the positive things that are happening, you can then hopefully tell a different story and also use those positive things to feed back into the government to, guide the way they might think about doing things and how they might be able to do things differently if what they're doing is not working.
Brilliant. Love it. Thank you so much. Oh, we're almost out of time. Adam, you've got 2 minutes each to showcase what's public and that what we can share publicly, if you're happy to go ahead with that. And then at the end, please hang on, everyone. We've got some resources and some more information, which we'll share in a moment.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Christy and Amy and Jean and Christine. It's been great to hear the stories and learn more about the work that you're doing that I even haven't heard myself. I'm Adam. I'm part of the Seer Data team. I spend a lot of time in the dashboards, and I love talking about the work that State of Greater Shepparton Lighthouse Project and Connected Beginnings Mildura do in understanding community data and different ways of tackling that. So I'll share my screen. Everyone can see that okay. So I'll start off with Greater Shepparton Lighthouse Project. So on their website, we've publicly embedded a Seer Data dashboard within the data section of their website. So I implore everyone after this meeting to go jump on, have a look, because I think you could spend hours in there and there's so much incredible detailed data. The goal of this report was to better understand well-being for children in the great state of Greater Shepparton, and to start better understanding and tracking the data against that, but also telling the stories of the work that's being done through Amy and Sarah and the amazing team. I want to show what the dashboard looks like. So it's aligned to a RACI nest. For those who don't know what a RACI nest is, it's a common structure of well-being across the domains listed at the top here. So valued, loved and safe, material basics, healthy, learning, participating, identity and culture. The great thing is both Greater Shepparton and Connected Beginnings Mildura align to this framework, which means you can see different ways of understanding the data. So if I scroll down the dashboard, you can look at the learning domain. If I click, you can look at the learning domain. A lot of this data is aligned to AEDC data, and it talks about not just what the data is, but also what are the insights from the data. So with the release of 2024, Greater Shepparton highlighted that there was a significant increase in the level of vulnerability. So for them being able to understand that, share that with their community, share that with funders or people who, government people who are, should care about this. It's a really important information. So not only the data, the insights, stories about the work that they're doing. So there's publicly embedded photos, videos that can be embedded within the dashboard, and then the actual data itself. So if I scroll down, you can see some types of data. So the children developmentally on track for language and cognitive skills. So where Greater Shepparton is sitting at 73% in 2024 versus the state in general. And so what Seer Data does is it helps. We have the data set. We help localize that data to what's relevant for the region. So for Greater Shepparton, it's Greater Shepparton versus the state. And you can see that tracked across these domains. So another one in 2024, a reduction of children developmentally on track. So as I said, implore you to take a look. You can see some of the insights from this work highlighted, photos, videos, a lot of narrative. As I said, take a look and spend some time in here, especially looking across the different domains and seeing, what's the difference in the data that they're pulling, data that they're pulling, the programs that they're running. It's really comprehensive and a great example of, how to better understand, the needs of children and what's happening in Shepparton. So that's Shepparton. What I'll jump into is a private dashboard behind the scenes for Mildura. So for Mildura, Connected Beginnings, as I had mentioned earlier, they're aligned to the RACI nest framework. And so they've got the domains across the top, healthy, identity and culture, learning, material basics, valued and safe. They also have the Kapiyan, which is the community insights, which is behind a kind of private dashboard. So we'll just jump into the key stats here. If we look at a stat like learning, similar to what I just walked through, the domain, we can look at the community data for Indigenous preschool enrollment coming in. And, when I've spoken with Christine and the team with Connected Beginnings Mildura in the past, I think the, learning more about how they use data to not only better understand their community, but also where some gaps are. And so one of the gaps was Indigenous preschool enrollment. So, a really critical piece of data that a lot of community organizations might struggle to find. And so through the partnership with government data coming in, us helping translate that into these insights, they can better understand that data set and try to enact change, working with schools, with their community awareness campaigns, advocacy. So there's a lot of data in here about that. And as you can see, it's displayed in different ways. And and there's little pieces of insight. What does the data show? What does the community know about the data? And what's the difference between what's the data showing and what the community knows? So that's an example of the community data, but they also pull in community insights, survey data, school readiness survey. So there's a lot of really helpful, useful data being pulled together for use across these organizations for understanding children's well-being aligned to the Eraser Nest and some of the other community needs and strengths. So that's all
Thanks,
I think I have
Adam.
time for. I think I'm on
Appreciate
1
that.
p.m. So thanks, everyone.
So we'll just share a slide now for anyone who's interested. We are really thrilled to be able to have developed 18 modules for community data work that we've developed based on our experience working with all our partners and organisations we get to work with. It'll be freely available, and it's going to be available in June. So as I said, 18 modules, including foundational information that anyone working with data in community needs to know around governance, privacy, First Nations data sovereignty, and then how you might use data through the different stages of your place-based work. So we've done this in collaboration with Place Australia, and Place Australia will be making, as I said, this resource freely available in June. And I am thrilled that this is going to be launched soon. If you'd like early access to those resources, please let us know. You can scan the QR code and we'll put you on the list and make sure that you get access to that free training for community data work. And then additionally, for anyone who's interested in social impact and sport, and I know that this is critically important in many of our regional areas, having had the opportunity to work with Rumballara over the years too, Amy, sport is a great pathway for creating impact in our communities. And I invite you to join our webinar with the Cowboys. We've been working with the Cowboys for the last little while. We do a lot of work in sport, and we'd be really excited for you to join us and hear about how sport is a vehicle for improving outcomes in our communities around Australia and internationally. So thank you, everybody, for joining. Huge and grateful thanks to Amy, to Christine, to Jen, and to all of your teams for your commitments, for your hard and your visions and realising those visions. I think Amy mentioned it at the outset. In the beginning, it's an endeavour, and it's truly worth the effort. And congrats as well to Genevieve and her team for your visions. We're on the journey with you, and I'm really excited to talk with anyone who similarly wants to get going with using data and evidence for community-led work in place. So thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your days.